It is a massive recruiting weekend around the country. Florida and Florida State certainly need to hit the home run with their official visits. Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and many other schools have big weekends as well. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started here on the Portal Podcast.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in. As I opened with, we have a very loaded show for you. Really, a half hour doesn't do enough, and I'm going to be doing some more shows over the next couple of days to preview all the stuff that's going on, Clemson and everybody else. But the focus is going to be a lot of the teams in the Southeast, along with a few Big Ten schools really getting after it. Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State. Can some of those teams that I just mentioned, Florida State, make a jump up? We're going to start with that. And we're also going to get into who's a possible commitment and who is absolutely, unequivocally must get for some of the key schools in the state of Florida. To help me break all of that down, John Garcia Jr. from Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst. John, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. It's about to get crazy, right? We had Memorial Day was kind of the, hey, let's everyone enjoy because it's about to go wild on the trail. Every kid's making every visit over the next 4 weekends. So commitments are coming, shifts are coming, perception will change. So it's a fun time for us.
Absolutely. And let's start off in the state where you reside, the Sunshine State. Florida, unless they got a commitment in the last 10 minutes, is residing with 2 verbal commitments right now. Florida State, even after the terrible 2-10 season, they've got 9, but how many of those kids are solid? Because several are taking visits. So right off the bat, what is your gut feel? Pick whichever one you want to go with, Gators or the Noles. Are they going to make a move? Because they both have some good players coming in, especially Florida. They got a bigger list. They both have good visit lists. But which one's going to make a move this weekend?
I think the onus is on Florida. This has been a funky cycle for them, right? In 2025, we saw the Gators build slowly. A lot of questions around, Billy Napier, number one hot seat guy, maybe in the country going into that 2025 season. And the Gators, proved a lot of people wrong on the field. And that created a positive wave of momentum for the class of 25, particularly at the end of the 25 cycle. And the Gators ended up, top 10, top 15 in the country. This year, it seems like a repeat, right? There's a lot of questions. A lot of people are curious, what is this thing going to look like in Gainesville? And I think a lot of recruits have been not as sold on the program to this point. Like you mentioned, just 2 verbal commitments. It's not panic button, death sentence, everyone freak out time just yet, because I think the summer will be fruitful for the Gators. And like you mentioned, this weekend in particular, a massive official visit weekend that just added Jaden Broadnax, to the picture, the Louisville commitment from South Florida. That group, I think, will inevitably start to turn up a little bit more orange and blue. But just from a pure volume perspective, 2 verbal commitments is not enough. The fans are clamoring, and there's a lot of kids that maybe Florida has to look into a little bit more, as opposed to if the kid is ready to pop. And I say that to say it's a weird time with recruiting boards, right? Where we're seeing official visits, but simultaneously there's going to be camps going on in the month of June. So there could be some fluctuation. So some of those kids on the bubble, plus or minus for the Gators, you wonder, do they push a little bit more and maybe take sooner than they would have otherwise accomplished? I think of a Brian Williams, receiver from Lake Mary High School. I think of a Javian Cooper, offensive lineman out of Melbourne, currently committed to Syracuse, going to Florida this weekend. I think Florida State the weekend after. Can they push and make some changes with prospects like that? DQ Fork was going to go up there. The Gators are in good shape for him out of IMG Academy. Just won linebacker MVP at the Rivals Camp Atlanta. So there are some pathways where Florida feels really good. CJ Hester's another one. I mean, there's a good group forming for the Gators. We mentioned Broadnax, the Louisville commitment that I think grew up a big Gator fan. So that one could be a big flip. So it could start to build as early as Friday or Saturday, but I'm expecting June to be pretty fruitful for the Gators if they elect to push for those type of prospects. Now, if you're waiting on the big guns, it's just going to take a little bit longer, and I think that's going to be the case, not just for Florida, but for everyone. I mean, most of these elite recruits, top 100 type recruits, what are they doing? 4 or 5 official visits. Every weekend is booked, and they're going to commit closer to the 4th of July than early June. So it's not a huge period of time that you got to wait in between to see if your OV, your momentum, and frankly, your NIL package has delivered. But you're going to have to fend off other programs in the process. And this goes the same for national champion Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Bama. I mean, anywhere, Texas, anywhere you look, that's the situation in terms of I got my official visit here versus the other 3 or 4 that I got to contend with. So that is sort of universal, but inevitably kids will fall in love. The numbers will sound good and decisions will be made. I believe as early as this weekend. And if there's a program that needs the juice, that needs them, I think Florida nationally is probably number 1 on the list, just from a volume and perception perspective.
I agree. Is there a guy that you think they have to land? Doesn't have to be this weekend, but who is the must-get player for the Florida Gators in this cycle?
I think it's a guy who was previously committed. I think it's Isaiah Williams. They've got the quarterback on board. Look, Will Griffin is as solid a prospect in terms of his commitment as there is maybe nationally, right? Tampa Jesuit kid, right up or right down I-75. Easy money there. He's doing his best to bring more talent to Gainesville. So you've got your, future face of the program in essence, maybe a guy going to battle beyond the DJ Lagway tenure in Gainesville. So that is box 1, A1. That is checked for Billy Napier and company. I'll give him credit there. So I think going forward, perception, right? Can you battle with the big boys? Isaiah Williams, a lifelong Gator fan, elite recruit, maybe the freakiest linebacker recruit in this class of 26. I get some Jalen Walker vibes on the field with what Isaiah can do. Gator fan, Orlando area kid. I mean, those used to be layups for the Gators. But now for Williams, flips to Ole Miss, still taking visits. He'll be at Georgia this weekend. Florida State's going to get him on campus. And I hear Texas is starting to knock a little bit more. So again, you want to win a big boy battle and flip perception. Go beat out Sark. Go beat out Kirby for an elite, SEC prospect, and pull them off that Ole Miss commitment. That's not easy nowadays under Lane Kiffin. So for me, it's Williams at Florida, must get for that staff.
When we come back, I'm going to talk about the same stuff, but with Florida State. It's slightly different, but the Seminoles aren't exactly dominating on the recruiting trail. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. For an example, the Pacers and the Knicks last night, you had a guy come off the bench for the Pacers and knock in 20 points in 12 minutes. I'm sure a lot of people would have liked to have gone with the over on his production. And you got Halliburton, like some of these guys just going crazy. He had a triple-double and over 30 points. Who's going to be the next guy? Maybe it's somebody for the Knicks. Is he going to do that? You want to do that in a parlay with an over-under bet, something like that? A lot of opportunities with FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, John. Florida State has 9 commits. I'm going to guesstimate at best 3 of those kids are solid. And it's because you're coming off 2-10. We don't have to dig into that. Everybody knows if you're following this podcast, you're into recruiting, you're into college football. But A, how do you solidify those commitments? And B, how do you add not only good players, but like they need O-line, like for the love of mankind, they got to start consistently recruiting O-line out of the high school ranks. They did it a little last year. Now you got to back it up. But what do they got to do to get into that upper echelon to grab some of those big time guys?
Well, it's never been an issue of getting prospects to Tallahassee. That's something Mike Norvell's been extremely good at, regardless of circumstance. And the circumstance now is, hey, you got new assistants all over the place. Obviously, Gus Malzahn running the offense, new position coaches throughout. Defensively, same deal. You bring that whole Nebraska contingent down to Tallahassee. So for me, I think it's about getting those kids back on campus, which at least in principle right now, that box is checked. But two, obviously, you got to nail it on those visits. You know, you're going to sit down intimately with Tony White, with these assistant coaches, with Knighton, and really sit down and preview what it could look like in Tallahassee going forward. And I think now, following spring ball, those pitches, those recruiting sales that are going down are a lot more realistic. You know your depth chart. The portal is basically done at this point. You know what it looks like relative to the class of 2026. So update that projection, update the board, and really, you know, kind of go old school with it. NIL, all of that will take care of itself. Florida State is above average. It's not a program that is hurting as far as we know from NIL. So I think it's really on the coaches to create that familiarity with prospects very close to home. You know, there's a lot of Panhandle, Central Florida, South Georgia recruits that are very, very good. A lot of blue chippers, several committed elsewhere already that are scheduled to go down to Tallahassee. So I think you got to play the flip game just as much as you're worried about holding on to your verbal commitments, because as you mentioned, more than half conservatively are considering multiple schools for official visits with those already penciled in, particularly that group of commitments in South Florida, right? Maycock, Darrell Bell, the third come to mind immediately. Tadarius Hughes, those guys are great players, all blue chips on Rivals.com, but all taking at least one other trip to another school in the weeks to come. So as much as you want to maintain, and that's going to be half the battle here for Florida State all the way through the season, you've got to be aggressive and play the flip game on the other side once you create that familiarity with some of these new coaches. I don't think it's a lack of effort thing from Mike Norvell. He's known for his energy. He's known for being consistent. He's known for being personal and being one of the great head coach recruiters, you know, in the country nationally. So I don't think it starts with him necessarily, but obviously he's got to delegate and play his time very well, because like for most of these schools, a lot of talent will be on campus all at one time. So how organized, how well oiled that thing looks with so many new faces will be key to Florida State as they pitch this, not necessarily culture changes. They just got to pitch, hey, like, we're getting back to it. Like it's bouncing back to what you saw in 2023. And that's the belief when you talk to Florida State commitments. That is their belief. You know, maybe they you know, obviously grew up in state. They're doing really well in the state of Florida right now. And they say, hey, we believe it's going to bounce back. You know, on the surface level, that is the first thing that has to hit home with this next group of targets. And then, like we said, many of them, Cam Brooks, Xavier Larice, Cameron Wilson down in Miami. These guys are committed to other programs right now that on the surface look like they're in better shape than Florida State with in-state recruits. I mean, that's something that can't happen. So you wonder how well they can execute in the weeks to come. But in terms of getting the talent on campus, which is just as tough as landing some of these guys, Florida State has never had an issue there, and it remains the case right now. It's just weird. I'm writing something about this at Rivals, you know, as we speak in and out. It's just weird that it feels like Florida State's ceiling in ACC recruiting is third. That's just something that is, in my lifetime, certainly in my professional lifetime, over a dozen years in, has never been the case. You know, the ceiling is always one. The floor maybe is three. Now it appears as if Clemson's off to such a strong start, and we'll talk about the crazy weekend they've got ahead, that they're going to be one or two at worst. Miami just got the number one player in the country. We know they're going to hit June very, very hard and contend for a fourth straight ACC recruiting title. So it just seems like Florida State is going all out for third place, which is just unfamiliar territory, but perhaps the new reality in this day and age of recruiting.
Yeah, and I don't even guarantee third. Syracuse is charging, among other programs.
SMU's been hot. I mean, let's not forget about those new guys, right?
Yeah, SMU's got serious NIL dollars, so that's something. Which guy do you think Florida State has to get? You and I talked this before the show, and like the Panhandle, South Georgia, it's debatable, but which one you got?
Yeah, I think the guy that you've harped on the most from the beginning is Cameron Brooks, currently committed at Cal, elsewhere in the ACC, but across the country, not down the road. He is going to take an official to Florida State in a couple of weeks. I think the weekend of June 6th. So the ball, once again, is in Florida State's court here. We understand, hey, look, new defensive staff, new defensive line coach, all of that stuff. Yes. Now the ball is in Florida State's court. Can you cut the ground in between yourself and the Cal Bears and perhaps overcome them in the weeks and months to come? You could go Larisi, the Oregon commitment, lifelong Florida State fan. FSU slow to that party, right? The new staff came in with the offer. The previous one wasn't as high on the do-it-all prospect out of Ugali High School. He's one you can mention. And then those Panhandle guys. I mean, Trenton Henderson, Caden Hall, lifelong FSU fan, Julius Miles right down the road, Jacoby Green's on campus this weekend. Any of those could be an answer. But for me, the biggest surprise in terms of where and when they committed, Cam Brooks to Cal, blue chip pass rusher, the type of trench player Florida State needs to get back to that 2023 form. So for me, all eyes are on him, in addition to holding on to some of those current commits. I think that's going to be just as big because almost all of them, as we've talked about, are looking at other programs.
Most intriguing for me in that regard, just want to bring this up. We don't have to dig into it, but it's ominous. Anytime your committed recruit goes on social media and randomly posts a picture of himself in another team's gear, that player would be Tredarius Hughes, like in Syracuse gear. Like a buddy of mine sent me a bet. I'm like, what is this? So Syracuse, by the way, I just want to give them a shout out. Their staff gets it done, man. Like that is Fran Brown and his staff put in effort. All applause on this end. But if you're Florida State, Tredarius Hughes cannot go to Syracuse over you. Politically, that's not a good look, John. That is not a good look at all.
And now what high school is he at? He's at Miami Northwestern. Yeah, so you talk about a double whammy, an in-state kid, again, lifelong fan, who ends up elsewhere in the conference out of a now state powerhouse high school. I mean, it's just bad dominoes lining up potentially there for Florida State. So yeah, it's the ACC is wide open, competitive. It's not chalk anymore. Heck, Clemson's number one right now. That alone, tells you how different it might be. It's not just Miami's race to lose anymore. Florida State fluctuating, and as you mentioned, Syracuse, SMU, right on their heels. And look, Georgia Tech's got a lot of the great prospects, on campus in the next few weeks. They could be sneaky down the road as well. They on the field feeling pretty good in Atlanta. So if all of that lines up, maybe they make an ACC title game run, what have you, that could be really bad, for Florida State. So there's a lot of dominoes and ripple effects to consider. But no doubt Florida State's going to be affected one way or the other.
When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the big box schools in the SEC, Ohio State, Michigan. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. All right, John, across the country, it is a massive weekend. You and I were both just utterly amazed at the approach that Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers are taking. I'll let you expand on it, but basically, if you're being recruited by Clemson, you're going to be in South Carolina this weekend. Explain to the people, I don't know if I've ever seen this, but if you explain it in your best ability, because it's pretty wild.
Well, look, Clemson marches to the beat of its own drum, and that carries over into recruiting as well, right? Dabo Swinney, typically very conservative, even with a verbal scholarship offer. This is the one caveat that Clemson can continue to hold on compared to just about everybody else in the country. When you get that Clemson offer, it truly means something maybe different compared to every other program in the country. Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Miami, Florida State, a little bit more or a lot more liberal with those offers. 300, 400, 500 could go out. Clemson, a much smaller number per class. And oftentimes they want you in Death Valley before that offer goes out. I've had many prospects over the years tell me that was the case. So because of that, they're able to focus on a smaller group of prospects, and it means they can get ahead of the scheduling. And this is the thing, the old adage was you want the last visit, right? You want the last official visit closer to signing day, so that impression, that time you just spent on campus weighs into which hat you put on in front of the cameras. But in this day and age of NIL, and let's be honest, programs asking recruits to shut it down and not take other visits, schools like Clemson are front loading that. And this is, the epitome of front loading. I think they've got 30 official visitors this weekend. Half of them are each and every Clemson commitment. So not only are you front loading with the uncommitted guys, you're bringing your commitments back who, again, have agreed to shut down the process. So guess what? They're enjoying their future home, and they're also peer recruiting. So at just about every single position where you're bringing in an elite recruit, you've got another guy committed there saying, hey, let's be roommates. Let's look at this together. We're coming in and experiencing this together. And it just resonates on a different level with uncommitted prospects. It always has, and it probably always will, maybe even more so now in the NIL era, because, kids can start comparing numbers and deals and different things like that to see kind of where they're at with certain things. So I applaud Clemson for leaning into its individuality on the recruiting trail. And look, it's not a lack of star power either, right? The commitment class is very strong. We mentioned number one right now in the ACC, and the group of targets that are going to Clemson are ridiculous. I jotted a few names down. Joey O'Brien, Tyler Atkinson, Darius Gray, Bryce Perry Wright, Blake Stewart. I mean, these are guys, Dre Quinn, these are guys from pipeline states that you're battling national programs for. But the hope is on the Clemson side, you grab a commitment or two, and those kids now shut it down, and you don't have to worry about that position, that kid going forward, because he's 99% locked in with the Tigers. So I think if it happens early in the week, you could see a little bit of, monkey see, monkey do. Hey, let's find some momentum here and roll with it. Kids have their head on a swivel in recruiting in this day and age. So momentum that we see with a school getting 4, 5, 6 commitments in one weekend, a lot of that starts with one guy getting up in front of the locker room, in front of the other parents and saying, hey, I'm going to be a Clemson Tiger. Everyone's, Dabo's jumping up, celebrating, dancing. And you see the instant gratification that obviously this generation looks for. You see it tenfold. You see it to the nth degree. And it might nudge a guy or two on the fence to say, hey, you know what? That I could see myself getting that, right? So, and then they roll with it. So I do think that it could be a really big weekend for Clemson. A lot of their big commitment bursts to this point came on visit weekends. I think the weekend Grant Wise committed, Gordon Sellers committed, Chance Barkley committed. It was one after the other. So you would imagine how big it got for an unofficial visit weekend. Well, now Clemson's paying for everything. The steaks, the hotels, wine and dine, right? So imagine that potential with some of these other guys on campus, especially with all those guys I just mentioned, all those verbal commitments coming back to Death Valley to nudge you that much more. So Clemson's unique in its recruiting approach. And if it went the way they envision it, Clemson would be all but done with the class of 2026 by this time next week. Unprecedented, probably won't happen, but not outside of the realm of possibility. That's how structured and efficient Clemson recruits.
Yeah, they are really amazing. A couple other schools that I find interesting. I don't know how much you paid attention to Ohio State's list. Holy moly. Felix Ojo, arguably the best offensive tackle in the country, not named Jackson Cantwell. It's certainly he's up there. Savion Hyder, maybe the best running back in the country. Xavier Griffin, maybe the best outside linebacker in the country. Jake Krell, in my opinion, the best pure pass rusher from a technical standpoint that I've ever seen out of high school. They've got Kerry Wilder, big-time player out of the state of California. It's going to be a defensive tackle coming. Like, it's a who's who. How easy do you think it is after winning a title for Ohio State? Like, what's the advantage of that, in your opinion?
Yeah, it becomes more of a selection process than recruiting, right? I mean, it's never that simple, especially, again, in this day and age. But when you get all these guys on campus together, I think you can flex it to another level. Brett Coolidge is going to be there from IMG as well. So this is a real big opportunity, for Ohio State. It hasn't been the most explosive class. It's been a good start, but, it hasn't been a headline-grabbing group to this point. They're still looking for a QB, which is always hard after you bring in a 5-star like Tavion St. Clair. So there are holes. There are room for improvement for Ryan Day and company. And look, they suffered some staff turnover too. So just like we talked about with Florida State, this could be an opportunity for Ohio State to really have an opportunity to sit down with some of these guys and say, hey, this is what we envision for you going forward. But the thing about the Buckeyes is it's not just this weekend. It's going to be every single weekend in Columbus. So you pick off one or two each weekend. And again, they don't have the Clemson no visit policy, but every school would like their verbal commitments to not take additional trips. So the sooner you grab them, the sooner that you can potentially, get that benefit of the doubt and have a group shut it down. Chris Henry has done so. Caden Dixon-Wyatt has done so. Two of the headlining Buckeye commitments to this point. So if more of that goes down, obviously, it's all for the positive for the defending champs. Not that recruiting has ever been an issue in Columbus or attracting talent, but I think when you have the caveat of a national title in the largest playoff field we've ever seen, at least for now, that stuff does carry weight. I mean, honestly, it could be the smallest things that carry weight, like Jeremiah Smith on the EA Sports cover for 2026. It's a no-brainer that he was invited, but he still did it. You got that Buckeye logo on every cover, front and center. That stuff matters because now you're selling that on top of everything else. Not only are we going to help you get rings, develop you for Sundays, but if it all lines up correctly, your NIL, your marketing, your branding, your exposure can be as big as possible. And as you and I well know, having known Jeremiah for years, he's the most, business first, no nonsense type of kid who doesn't, have that projectable personality that, people are going to throw cameras in front of unless his game is so dominant that it doesn't matter. And that's exactly what it has become. So Ohio State can even sell that angle, that unique angle that very few programs can. So yeah, the ball's in their court with a lot of those names on the list. And I think what's interesting about Ojo and Hyder and some of those you mentioned, even Krell, Ohio State may not be number one today for some of those guys. So curious coming out of the weekend, even if it's not a commitment, how much of the gap is closed following, 48 hours on Ohio State's dime in Columbus. So fascinating as any other visit list that we've seen.
Let me hit on one more. And you could argue that the most overall fascinating visit list in the country this weekend is Georgia. Now, somebody might say, oh, it's Georgia. Why is it fascinating? It's the crossover. Caden Prothro, Auburn and Florida right there with him. I'm surprised by it, but I'm told that is like a neck-and-neck race. Maybe the best tight end in the country. C.D. Morgan, a kid I know well, lives right down the road from me in Alabama. 6'5", 215, does not grow on trees, playing wide receiver. Everybody thinks he's going to Bama, but he's going up to UGA this weekend. Then you got Xavier Crow, another kid a lot of people think is going to Bama, another kid from Alabama. He's visiting UGA this weekend. And those schools, obviously, they hammer each other recruiting every year. Then you got Kamari Brooks, kid right down the road. Defensive end's really good. Was right down the road from Athens. They've got Carter Lucky, brother played at Georgia. They also got Chris Booker, kid from Atlanta, Hateville Charter, committed to Bama, visiting. Do you think there's a chance Georgia goes on a run here, John? I mean, it would not shock me because Georgia does such a good job as a staff.
Well, look, I think as we started recording, Ryan Mosley committed out of Carrollton. So That's no accident. I think the run is coming for UGA. Remember how many eggs were in that Jared Curtis basket, right? It's something we talked about every show for 2 months, right? It was such an all-in. We got to sort of correct this quarterback room and quarterback reputation, frankly, in Athens. Got him committed, lost him, got him back. Who knows what really went into all of that? We know it was a lot of effort on Georgia's end. That box is checked. Jared is done. I think he's coming back to campus this weekend. That is okay. We're all good there. Now let Kirby and T-Rob and all these great coaches go focus on everybody else. And I think you could see the dominoes start to roll. You mentioned guys that they're maybe not number one for, on the list going in. Just like with Ohio State, all those you mentioned, I bet Georgia's going to close a lot of ground this weekend. James Johnson, Justice Fitzpatrick, Minka's little brother. So many names on that list this weekend. And you just wonder how quickly things can start to change in recruiting. Hey, Sedarian Morgan, here's Jared Curtis. Sit down with him and talk about how you guys are going to try to form your own legendary duo in Athens, right? I mean, there's so many angles UGA can take here now that big, massive, previously unchecked box is checked. Now it's just going to be, we think, a sort of your typical UGA recruiting summer where, kids are like, hey, let's not overthink this, especially on defense at premium positions. Let's not overthink this. This is Georgia. We know what we're going to get here. The NIL is not where it is elsewhere. That much we know. But how many kids are willing to sacrifice a couple dollars for the potential to be developed and be right in the thick of it for the SEC and the CFP every single year? I mean, you can count on maybe one hand the programs that can truly sell that package right now. So Georgia's still maybe number one on that list, and that will always resonate. NFL will resonate as much as NIL for a lot of recruits, especially in and around the metro areas they recruit, which of course starts with Atlanta. So yeah, I think the Georgia run is on deck. So again, take a snapshot of the recruiting rankings. They're all going to change. Even USC as a runaway number one right now. Reclassifications, Xavier Griffin decommitment. It's starting to look possible for some of these other programs, Notre Dame, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Clemson, to start to make a run, towards that number one spot. So it might start changing at the very top sooner rather than later. And it should surprise nobody if Georgia's one of those schools in the mix.
Absolutely. It really is a fascinating weekend for the Dogs. John, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yes, sir. Rivals.com. As we mentioned, a lot of visit previews and a ton more reviews to come in between some verbal commitments over the coming days. So check it out.
Absolutely, sir. Appreciate your time today. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods on the go, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, any place like that. And of course, on YouTube. Please like and subscribe and leave a review. Helps us out a ton. We will see you again soon on the Portal Podcast.